What is up, guys? Cacus Maximus here. That's my Roman name. Thank you so much for stopping by. And today we have some brand spanking new Destiny 2 news, courtesy of the Bungie weekly update that has just released, unveiling official information. Pretty big one today, the highlight being a bunch of the Sandbox changes to weapons, tons of exotics being affected, coming with Shadowkeep, a preview of the brand new PvE and PvP meta, so let's get started. Now, first things first, however, Bungie released an actual calendar of what's happening starting with the release of Shadowkeep and moving forward throughout the month into November even, so here it is. Firstly, we have the Shadowkeep launch happening on October 1st. We get the Moon Destination, Seasonal Artifact, Finishers, Armor 2.0, 2 new strikes, Crucible updates, 2 remade maps, and 1 new map. Crucible Labs will have the Elimination Game mode and free seasonal rank rewards. So that's the launch of the expansion, and not too far away from that, on October 5th, we have the Raid launching and also the Vex Offensive. Now you'll notice those two different symbols. Raid launch, that's for Shadowkeep owners. The Vex head symbol, that's for the Season of the Undying pass holders, and that's included with Shadowkeep. But they're just making a distinguish between Shadowkeep content and the seasonal content. However, moving on from there, on October 8th, we have Hero and Legend Nightmare Hunts. And then moving on from there, on October 15th, we have Master Nightmare Hunts and our first Iron Banner. So this is kind of interesting. Nightmare Hunt is kind of the new activity coming with Shadowkeep, taking place on the moon, and there's several different rarities, and it looks like the 2 harder rarities are only launching after the raid. So that will affect people leveling up and trying to get raid ready pretty substantially. In any event, moving on from there, on October 22nd, we have the exotic quest Leviathan's Breath. This is for that exotic heavy bow that we've seen in promotional images. That's going to be pretty sweet. And then, after that, from October 29th to November 19th, we have the Festival of the Lost event. Notice the symbol is one we haven't seen so far. This is the symbol for free-to-all Destiny 2 players. So, new late players, presumably, like anyone, regardless of what they own in terms of expansions and Seasons Pass, they will get access to Festival of the Lost. Moving on from there, however, interestingly, also on October 29th, so that when Festival of the Lost starts, the dungeon is also going to be launched. So, the only other dungeon we have in the game so far is the Shattered Throne dungeon, available on the Dreaming City once every 3 weeks. So, it's going to be interesting to see, like, a brand new dungeon. Will it have its own exclusive loot? Like, how substantial is it going to be? Shattered Throne is almost like a mini raid. I think it competes with raid layers in terms of content, so that's actually a pretty exciting thing. And we also have a new PvP mode, Momentum Control, launching at the same time. Now, continuing on from there, also launching on that same day of October 29th, we have the exotic quest for the Divinity Trace Rifle. Now, this is interesting because this trace rifle was actually put into the same slot as all of the raid rewards that were showcased during the PAX event. So, Destiny 2 was playable, like the new build was playable at PAX. People went into the collections and inventory, saw all of the raid loot, and the Divinity was there. So obviously, we assumed it was the raid exotic associated with this new Shadowkeep raid, but apparently it has its own separate quest. Perhaps you'll have to have beat the raid to get access to it, and that's why it's in that same section with all the other raid rewards. But more likely, because this and the dungeon are launching at the same time, it's going to have something to do with that dungeon. Just like the Wishender exotic bow, you have to go in to the Shattered Throne dungeon and do stuff there. Moving on from there, however, on November 5th, we have the first raid challenge being introduced to the game. And then on November 19th, we have the Vex Offensive Final Assault. So Vex Offensive starts all the way when the raid launches on October 5th, and then way later, November 19th, something is happening with Vex Offensive, perhaps more rewards, more difficult enemies. We'll have to wait and see. So that is the calendar for what's going on with Shadowkeep. Now let's move on from there and talk about the Sandbox changes. So in terms of general weapon changes, a big one here Weapon mods are now treated as reusable unlocks instead of consumables. Any mods you have in your inventory will be converted to unlocks. This gives players the opportunity to play with different mods more frequently, and if the only copy of a mod you already have is in a gun, you will need to reacquire one to unlock it. Okay, so that's actually really sweet. It means that if you have a gun, you can put on major spec or minor spec. If you're in a PvE activity, you go into PvP, you put on, Icarus Gripper. I'm, throwing out a random example, but you put on a more PvP oriented mod, and it's not going to delete those other mods or anything like that. So that's a really good change, and it's akin to what's happening with Armor 2.0 and the mods there. Moving on from there with the more specific buffs, auto rifles. PvE damage increased between 30 and 25% depending on combatant rank. Wow, that's a big buff. So if you've got stuff like the breakneck auto rifle, that thing could become in the PvE meta with this buff. Moving on from there, for the bows, PvE damage increased by 31% against minor enemies, that's red bars, and 26% against major yellow bar enemies. That's another pretty significant buff there. And they fixed an issue where the bow draw times were displayed incorrectly on the inspection screen. Next up, hand cannons. PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 30%. Wow, hand cannons are already super heavily used. You're going to be getting a lot more one-shots. But also, lightweight and adaptive hand cannons use a new firing animation while aiming down sights. And this change was done because it's going to improve weapon accuracy overall, because currently players can shoot the 140 and 150 archetypes faster than the recoil animation is actually appearing on screen. So your gun isn't even settled yet, and you're already shooting the next round. So a new animation is going to line up more properly with the actual fire rate of these guns. And overall, it should improve their effectiveness. And one more thing, they reduced the effect the range stat has on damage falloff, effective range, for this weapon archetype. So I think what that means is that your range fall off is super sharp. Like once your optimal range is done, you have honestly a few feet before your damage just plummets. So hopefully the damage fall off will be less dramatic with this update. And so overall, those are some pretty big buffs actually to hand cannons. Next up, for machine guns, PvE damage against minor enemies only increased by 25%. That's great, but unfortunately they need more damage against majors since they're nerf. But they also increased the effects of damage range falloff on this weapon archetype. So kind of the opposite of what's happening to the hand cannons and their damage range. Moving on from there, pulse rifles. PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 28%. And they increase the effects of damage range fall off on this weapon archetype. So similar to machine guns, they'll fall off a little bit more sharply, I guess. And archetype specific damage changes that impacts both PvE and PvP. So for the rapid fire pulse rifles, those are going to now deal 14 damage to the body, 23.8 precision damage, and previously it was 13 and 21.4. So rapid fires have been buffed. Also, high impacts have been buffed as well. Now, 21 damage to the body, 33.6 damage to the head, and previously they were 20 to the body and 32 damage to the head. And this buff is pretty important because, of course, the difference between 32 precision damage and 33.6, aka 34, is the difference between getting to 200 damage with 2 bursts where every shot is a precision shot. So essentially that archetype is going from a 3-burst kill or a 2-burst on low armor enemies to pretty much always a 2-burst kill if you're landing your headshot. So take a look at your high impact pulse rifles as well. They just got a pretty big buff. Moving on from there, scout rifles. PvE damage increased between plus 36% and plus 18% depending on the combatant rank. Wait, what? That's it? Bungie, we were complaining about these in PvP as well. They see absolutely zero play in the Crucible. In fact, that's what most of the complaints about. Yeah, they sucked in PvE too, but I feel like Bungie missed the mark here massively. I hope we see something else leading up to Shadowkeep because scout rifles need help in PvP as well. And although this PvE damage increase is actually pretty significant, and they will see more play in PvE, this simply isn't good enough. They need help in PvP as well. Moving on from there, sidearms. PvE damage increased to major and minor combatants by 16%. Sniper rifles. PvE damage increased by 47% against major enemies and 20% for others. Okay, that 20% for others is the important part. And this is a massive, massive change, and it gives us insight into the brand new PvE meta, because certain weapons, like for example, the Reckoning, like Season of the Drifter Sniper, that can get 4th times the charm, and Firing Line for extra damage, those can output a lot of damage, and they just got 20% better. It might be a sniper rifle meta in PvE with Shadowkeep. Now, they do say that the exotic rifle perk damage for some of the exotics out there has been modified to compensate, so don't think that all the exotic sniper rifles just got 20% better. They probably got a little bit better, but not 20%. Moving on from there, for submachine guns, PvE damage increased by 22.5% against major and minor combatants. That's a huge buff. Recluse, hello. For aggressive frame SMGs, they removed the intrinsic effect of deals bonus damage at close range. The bonus was 10%, but was unintentionally always active at any range. The bonus damage has been moved to the base damage for the 750 RPM SMGs, resulting in no damage change. As a result, Terrabell and Huckleberry gain 10% damage in both PvE and PvP. So that's actually pretty sweet. Moving on from there, specifically for exotics. So the Sweet Business is actually getting a pretty decent buff. The magazine size from 100 up to 150, increased PvE damage by 15%. High caliber rounds have been replaced with armor piercing rounds. The damage has been increased as well to 15 body, 21.2 precision, previously 13 body, 21.14 precision. And this weapon no longer requires you to be firing when you pick up ammo to have it automatically reload. Interesting buffs there. For the Graviton Lance, PvE damage increased by 30%. Pretty big change. Sunshot magazine from 8 to 12, big change there as well. Vigilance Wing, PvE damage increased by 25% across the board. Now the Crimson, damage changed to 19 body, 30.5 precision, previously 13 body, 24.75 precision. Massive damage improvement there, and that's going to be active in PvP as well, obviously. And they fixed an issue that was causing this weapon to deal higher flinch than intended. So slight nerf there for the flinch, but that damage is insane. The Merciless, they fixed the missing aim assist stat for this weapon. The Ace of Spades got a bit of a nerf because the Memento Mori's damage is now affected by range fall off, so at further range is going to be doing less damage. The Lumina, noble rounds should apply their buff to allies more reliably now. And for the Colony, the Serve the Colony unique perk now functions exactly the same as auto loading holster. Okay, moving on from there. For the perks, Subsistence, reduce the impact this perk has on total reserves. So that perk just got a lot better. It's not going to take away your reserves as much as it does right now. So basically just kill enemies, you get a ton of ammo back, means that you almost never have to reload. Be looking for guns with subsistence on, honestly. Then ricochet rounds, massive nerf. Remove the hidden bonus to damage fall off. Guys, ricochet rounds was one of the most important things you could get on, for example, a spare rations roll, because it had a hidden range stat of something absurd like plus 15 to range. So everyone out there with ricochet rounds on their spare rations, you're gonna have to farm a new one, because yeah, it just got a massive, massive nerf. I think this is what this is saying. Remove the hidden bonus to damage fall off. Hopefully this is like almost like a misprint, and they're saying that they're just adding it so that it actually shows in game in the tooltip, because there's too many useless perks in this game, and ricochet rounds just became another one if they're truly doing this. Moving on from there, Swashbuckler. Perk now activates when getting a kill with the ball lightning melee. Grave Robber. Perk now activates when getting a kill with ranged melee abilities like ball lightning and explosive knife. That's a buff overall. Then the 1-2 punch perk. Pretty infamous. They reduced the effectiveness of stacking 1-2 punch and cross counter with the Liar's Handshake. Example, players won't be able to defeat Riven in less than 3 seconds after Shadowkeep launches using the combo of 1-2 punch and the Liar's Handshake, but we know many of you will try other builds and potentially succeed. So likely it's still going to be a powerful combo, it's just going to be reduced so it's not doing millions upon millions of damage and melting things instantaneously. Now they do say we still have a few TWABs before Shadowkeep, which will shore up our patch notes previews on a variety of topics, ranging from Black Armory access to bug fixes. Stay tuned. So again, a big preview of what's coming. Hopefully there's more changes. I really hope they buff scouts in PvP, but that's what we know so far. Moving on from there, are you farming Reckoning? Are you trying to get a God Roll spare rations, which has actually just changed because Ricochet rounds are going to be nerfed? Well, there's actually another change coming to Reckoning pretty soon, starting on September 17th. Now, when this day happens, all negative modifiers will be removed from Reckoning. Bungie says this activity will continue to feature a weekly single with a daily rotation of Brawler, Grenadier, and Heavyweight. Our goal in this change is to improve the replayability of Reckoning so players will feel more inclined to hop into matchmaking for some sweet loot. This should also help to address some feedback items from players that specific modifiers could feel too punishing. So we're looking at you, Blackout Darkblades, no crap. So, wow, September 17th, Reckoning is going to get a whole lot easier. So it's just going to be just beneficial modifiers. And the days when it's Heavyweight and no downside, whew, that's the time to farm. That is the time to farm. And so guys, that is it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, learned something new. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.